Thank you so much, Mel, for inviting me, for being here, and me being me, present you with a surprise talk. This is not a talk I announced, and actually this is very new, and I really hope I'm going to pick your brains on this and get some feedback. I'm super excited about this new line of work that I'm developing, and yeah, I really hope that this will work well with your team too and your community. Okay, so let me see, slide 2. Okay, so if you are in Paris and you go through a Parisian garden at a certain point in Rue de Varenne, you're going to bump into this famous sculpture, which is The Thinker by Rodin. And if I ask you, if this person, the thinker thinks about the self, uh, usually you would agree that actually somehow the self or the thinking is coming from the bob, from here, not from the toes, right? So the idea is like we have a thing called the mind that somehow is related to the brain, and that's kind of like taken for granted, right? But what I want to say today, and hopefully later on, you're going to understand why I'm bringing this topic and how this relates with your conference topic, is as a philosopher, my job is to ask annoying question. And one of the annoying questions is like, why the mind is necessarily related to the brain and brain activity, and why I have an Eon piece coming shortly, hopefully. It's called Do You Need Your Toes to Think? And I want to convince you that actually you do need your toes to think, and you don't need just the neurons to think. And hopefully through this talk, I'm going to convince you as well and present you with some good arguments why is this is the case, and what are the implications for creating like artificial versions of ourselves, of our embodiment, yeah, or ourselves, yeah. And why is this? Because, well, around the world, you have many brain and body institutes, but you don't have any liver and body institutes. And the question is like, why? Or a stomach in the body. And the idea is like somehow people consider automatically that the liver is the body and the stomach is part of the body, but somehow we are reluctant to this idea that the brain is the body or part of the body. And I think for me as a philosopher, the interesting question is like, why? I mean, I'm doing interdisciplinary research and many of my colleagues scientists, and I have all the time very interesting discussion. They say, well, you philosophers, you never found out anything. You just like, you don't have any answers. But the job of philosophers is to ask questions all the time. So this is what I'm going to do right now, just like asking questions of why exactly we're considering that the brain and the mind is necessarily, distinct from the body and not part of the body. Why would you take this for granted? And as I said, this is very fairly new work, and I have the preprint here. If you want to have a look to the full-fledged paper. But here I'm going to give you just like the sketch of the backbone of the argument and then where I'm taking this to the next steps. And hopefully going to do some collaboration. Yeah. So I said, I'm going to very quickly say a couple of words about myself. I'm going to assume you don't know anything about me. And then I'm going to try to argue why the body is important for, building artificial agents and all the AI stuff. And how can I prove that? And what's cooking in the oven? And some future direction. And as I said, I hope I'm really sorry I'm not there in person. For a person very much interested in embodiment, that's a shame on me. I'll be able to be there physically present, but I really hope we're going to, through the organizers, keep in touch and don't hesitate to reach out to me later on. Okay, so I was trained as an armchair philosopher and I was obsessed with the problem of subjective experiences. So most of you, probably you are aware with the famous thought experiments of Mary the scientist. So imagine you have a brilliant scientist called Mary, and she's born in a black and white environment. And she, because she's brilliant, she lives in the future. She has access to all the physical facts of what is happening in the human brain when you perceive a red tomato, right? So she knows absolutely everything about the underlying neural mechanism of, color perception in the brain. Now, the question is, one, she turns 21, let's say, she's released in the world and she's presented with a real tomato, like red tomato. Then the question is, will she learn something new, namely what it is like to see red? Or she will say something, nah, this is boring. I already know what it is like to see red because I already know the neural mechanism of color perception in the human brain. Yeah, so there's a huge debate on that. And I spent my PhD working on this. Yeah. But I'm from Burgundy, and as a proper French person, it's like obsessed with good food and good wine. And my my angle approach was like, who cares about seeing the red tomato? The most important is to actually eat the tomato for the survival, right? So actually what is really important is like what you put inside your body, right? So, and then I asked myself, what would be the Mary the scientist thought experiment for senses that actually are not distal, that are proximal, right? Like things that actually touch your body or go inside your body, right? And because then you'll have a completely different scenario. And then it's like the entire way of framing this problem would be like very different. Yeah. So I went back, as I said, as a philosopher, I said, wait a minute, like Wittgenstein said, wait a minute, let me think. I don't want to swallow whatever debates are there. It's like, I want to understand what's this all about, right? This is what I want to do philosophy in the first place. So you have, let's say, like the layered cake reality. I apologize for you're going to have a lot of food metaphors because, as I said, it's like I'm French. We are obsessed with food and wine in Burgundy. Yeah. So the layered cake metaphor is like you have the fundamental level, which is the physics, and then the big question is like how you connect the cherry on the top or the strawberry on the top with the physical here. This is exactly the same problem as a marriage scientist. So you have something which is fundamental here, and then how exactly these two things are connected together. And you're going to see later on why is this related to what I'm doing right now is because my take was I don't think that's a real problem. The real problem is like how you get from this level to this level. If you explain how you get from self-organizing physical system to self-organizing organic biological system, then maybe you're going to understand later on what is special about whatever we call psychological states. Yeah. So I said, forget about the cake. Maybe actually the layer of cake is not reality. And I'm putting this slide for my Sicilian friends. I said, maybe reality is more like a Sicilian granita. So it's a bit more messier, right? Going back again to this idea, okay, so what would be the thought experiments for senses that actually go inside the body and mix with other senses? So it's a bit more complicated than that, yeah? But seriously, where this idea of having a mind is coming from? So I step further back. So I said, wait a minute, again, was like, why we even have this problem in the first place, right? When I was a PhD student, you will see the dots there with a purpose. So when I was a PhD student, I was given very good advice to actually come whenever I go to a conference to have like a pitch elevator to tell in like a couple of words why I want to spend 5 years or 4 years of my life working on that particular topic. And since I like to draw, I said, well, can I do a drawing? I can, move around with my drawing in my pocket. And if people ask me, put the drawing on the table and explain to them what's all about. And this is what I'm going to share with you is a drawing that I did when I was a PhD student about my take on the problem. So I started this idea that we have a dichotomy between the pure mind on one hand and the impure body on the other hand. And then that was me, like the puzzle philosopher in between. So how exactly this dichotomy between pure minds and impure body comes from? Yeah. Remember again, the liver and body institutes versus like the brain and body institutes. Yeah. So why we even talk about this? Yeah. And then if you go back, you realize that this idea of distinction between brain and mind and brain and body later on, the modern distinction comes from what Plato and Pythagoras people call the soma-sema picture, which is soma means body, like somatic, and sema means tomb. So the idea was that the body is a tomb for the soul, from which you need to escape, yeah, because it's something like corporeal level, and you have something, that doesn't go away. And hence we have inherited this idea of immortal minds versus mortal bodies. When you think about, the body is the thing that makes you suffer. You need to go to the loo, you need to, eat, you grow old and die eventually. So this is not very reassuring. But if you're a self-organizing biological system that wants to survive, this is what all living systems want to do, then you need some sort of explanation how exactly can carry on without, dealing with the mortality of the body. Yeah? And we have inherited this distinction, which later on, fast forward, the Cartesian heritage, the conscious mind, which has this inner realm, which is connected to the world via the senses, and the mind is a different sort of entity from the body. And apologies for this very long introduction, but I want you to understand where I'm coming from and why what I'm proposing it's a bit radical and different. And I don't want you to say, oh, where does it come from me? It's like, what was that? It's like, I want you to understand where I'm coming from. Yeah. So as I said, I don't believe that this distinction is useful. I don't think we have a very good understanding what the body is. We have no idea what the mind is yet. And I think we need to understand better this distinction between mind and body because if you go back to the, Cartesian, I think, therefore I am. I wrote a paper called I Overthink, Therefore I'm Not. So whatever you call feeling of reality or feeling of presence, basically might be paradoxically linked to overthinking. So we're being too much in the head. Remember the statue of Rodin, the thinker, right? It's like you are too much in the head and you forget about the toes. And if that's happening, that you're not maybe you don't even feel real. And I'll tell you more about a condition that actually it's exactly having this symptoms. So why is this important? Because, as I said, if this distinction is so deeply rooted in our society that on one hand we have, if you have a mental health problem, you go to one building. If you have a liver problem, you literally go to a different building. Yeah. So it's like we treat minds and bodies like as distinct ontological entities. And as this is the same goes with the artificial systems. So on one hand, we build like artificial minds, like artificial agents, minds and bodies. And on the other hand, we build like artificial bodies, like I don't know, robots, and then we try to glue them together, and we have big problems in doing this and big challenges, yeah. And this is why I think some of the challenges that we are facing today with this blooming field of artificial life, artificial intelligence, and robotics, and it's precisely because we have inherited this like dichotomy when you try to glue together and understand how the mind works in a, let's say, at least from my opinion, from a wrong angle. So we need to change the angle, yeah. So now in my lab, I'm basically, doing interdisciplinary research. So I'm using all these measures. I'm not going to present data for today. I apologize for this. As I said, I'm going to present think of me as the exotic philosophers. And my question is my job is here is to shake a bit the coconut tree and make you think of some questions, maybe change a bit of the angle. And one of the first questions I want to challenge you on is to have a look around and ask yourself why you don't see kids. Maybe there are kids in the room. I don't know. I can't see them. But it's like typically at conferences you see adults, and why is that not trivial? It's not trivial because when we start investigating all these things, we already step behind the tools that actually we're using to investigate minds and bodies. I don't know if this makes sense. So we need to be aware that whatever we are investigating here and now comes from our perspective as adults. But we don't come into this world as fully fledged adults like Athena from Zeus' head. We develop into the things we are, right? So I think if we really want to understand how the mind-body connects, we need to start with the fundamental relationship between body and body. And I'm so sorry I can't be there. Just because this is my favorite part of the talk, to look at your faces when I'm going to share this and communicate this. So when we think of pregnancy, typically we associate pregnancy with a certain category of people that have the ability to carry babies in their bodies. But when we think of pregnancy through the perspective of a developing human, all of you here have been inside another person's body. So this means that the fundamental state of pregnancy is universal. This is where we need to start if you want to understand human embodiment. It's not just with the solitary, male thinking thinker on a rock, yeah, like a Rodin thinker. This is not how reality works. In reality, we need to start with a body within a body case from a biological perspective, yeah. And this is something I'm already written on. But the key idea, and this is why I named my lab the Co-Embodied Self Lab and Cell Lab, because I'm interested in, if you zoom out from the mind, if you zoom out from the neurons and the head, and you go back to the fundamental biological roots of the human body as a whole, and you realize basically we start as cells, not as neurons. So the fundamental question, really important question, is like, in order to understand the human mind, is like how you get from cells to selves. Remember the layered cake, right? So I'm interested in how you get from systems that self-organize like snowflakes, because a snowflake is also a self-organizing system, physical system. But how you get from snowflakes to embryos, like self-organizing biological system, yeah? And I think if by getting that question right, we might also solve the mystery of like psychological states. And in doing that, I'm obviously not alone. I'm building on other people's shoulders. And one of my favorite thinkers is Pamela Lyon. She has this beautiful paper called Biogenic Approach to Cognition, where she basically contrasts the anthropogenic with biogenic approach. So anthropogenic approach is basically, remember the lens, yeah? So anthropogenic approach is like, take for granted the adult-centric lens, and you start with a human, cognition, and work down to more general explanatory concept. Whereas like biogenic approach, you focus on not what makes us special as humans, but what connects us as living beings to all other living systems, and work up to the human case by asking psychological questions as they were biological questions. And basically what I want to do, going back to my drawing, I want to bring back the animal, the impure body, into the picture, because I think we cannot get rid of that impure body, and we shouldn't, because otherwise we're basically going to miss important things, what it actually means to be human, yeah? So the basic idea is that whatever we perceive is ultimately geared towards self-preservation. All experiences are fundamentally self-experiences. We cannot, and this is connected with, the first-person perspective. So we can't really get what is objectively out there, because we cannot detach from, reality and take an bird's eye view, because we are simply inside the picture. Think of like surfing a wave in ocean. This is something you can do, but you cannot get rid of the ocean. You're already in the ocean, right? So I'm basically, whatever I'm proposing is trying to go against this whole idea of, brain and vat experiment, and which basically takes for granted the distinction between brain and body. I don't think that distinction is useful. I think we should get rid of it. I think the brain is part of the body. I think neurons are one type of cells. And if we want to understand how the human organism works, we shouldn't focus just on brain alone. We should focus on the bodies, and more importantly, the bodies in relation to the other bodies. This is what the fundamental case is. And why is this important? And this is the new idea I want to bring in, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this. So obviously, the important question is like how you distinguish between biological and artificial systems, because humans tried, to make artificial version of themselves for a very long time now. So this is not something very new. It's like we try to do artificial version of ourselves since the dawn of time. Think of Leonardo da Vinci or Mechanical Turk. But what I want to say is that in living system, I'm playing a bit with English language. I want to say, because there is an end, there is an end. So intrinsically in biological systems, there is an end. So there is like mortality. And this means that staying away from the end gives the meaning of whatever you do in between. Yeah. And also, this is also an exercise that I'm typically doing. I can't do it right now because sadly I'm on Zoom, but I'm asking people, okay, so what do you think is the opposite of death? And many people say life, but actually the opposite of death is birth. And life is what lies in between. Yeah. So what I want to say is, like, in biological systems, because there is an end in the sense of like meaning, finality, which is like stay away from the end or don't die. Yeah. What does it mean? It means that basically we need to distinguish between, if you go back to biological self-organizing system, we need to distinguish between information processing in a qualitative versus quantitative way. So in living system, all information processing is necessarily qualitative in the sense, like, whether you like it or not, you process information through the lens of self-preservation, and hence it has the valence, good or bad. Good, stay alive; bad, die. Yeah. So whatever we process information in biological systems, and this is something we share with worms, with cats, with whatever living system, is it has the intrinsic quality to it, which is necessarily related to self-preservation in life. This is not the case with artificial systems, where information processing is necessarily cumulative. Because they are built on formal life, on formal worlds, they process information as if eternity was available to them and infinite resources. Yeah. But this is obviously not the case. And hence the important question is, like, okay, so if with that distinction in mind, what is the difference between biological and artificial agents? Yeah. So this is something I'm working on. I'm really interested at the moment. So again, I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on this. Typically, the agents, or the sense of agency, is defined as the ability to feel in control of my own bodily actions, and to leverage them and access change in the external world. Wait, because I received a message. Okay, so I'm going to rush through this. I'm going to rush through this to the two movements, and I want to present you very quickly this thing that we are doing at the moment. So basically, I present you with a background idea, but what I want to do at the moment is to look at a project, what we are doing. Sorry about this. So the distinction between biological and artificial agents is super important for the projects we are doing, because there is a lot of data that show that humans automatically attributes like human-like features to artificial others, but the opposite is less studies. So what is the effect of interacting with human minds, like biological agents versus artificial agents, on the human body and the human sense of self? And this is what we are doing at the moment. Yeah, we are collecting data on dyadic interactions between human-human versus human humanoid robots, human VR characters, and human AI. And we are doing this in three different cultures, like UK, Portugal, and Japan, because cultural differences are important. And why is this important? So while people interact with artificial agents versus humans, we take physiological measures from the human body. And this is important because the body might respond in a certain way that you're not aware of. So if I'm in front of you right now, I'm holding a tennis ball, and I'm measuring what is happening in your body when I'm smashing the tennis ball. And then I'm drawing on the tennis ball a smiley, and you see me that I'm drawing the smiley, and you know that it's tennis ball, and I'm smashing it again, the tennis ball, and then you're going to have a very different physiological responses. This means that the body reacts in a certain way that we don't have necessarily control over it. Yeah, and this is what I'm after. So taking physiological measures on this. And importantly, our participants are divided into two groups. So participants that are connected versus participants that are disconnected from their bodies, because the idea will be to see whether people that feel more disconnected from their body, they are more comfortable with interacting with artificial agents rather than human agents. Yeah, I think that's super important. And why is because many people that describe feelings of being detached from themselves, from the body, they also describe themselves as being as feeling like robots, like machines. Yeah. So I think the really important question that we need to address in the future is like how exactly interact with humans versus artificial other impacts the human sense of self and human sense of body, because we are porous creatures, right? We constantly change. We're not fixed individuals. So with that, I think I'm always over my time. I want to very quickly just go. I'm not going to talk about depersonalization. I'm sorry about that. But what I really want to do is to tell a bit about the pipeline. So we're going to start a new project. It's called Hybrid Agencies, Crossing Borders Between a Biological and Artificial Worlds. So please stay in touch if you're interested in this. The idea is to look really at the relationship between embodiment and artificial systems, both in organic and non-organic system, because I think that's what the future lies. And if you're interested in these topics, please look up our forthcoming special issue. We're going to have also a workshop coming up in February 23rd. And with that, I would like to thank, thank my lab for the work carried on this, my funders for giving me the means to make it happen, and of course you for your attention. And thank you, Mel, for the kind invitation. And I'm sorry if I run over my time.
No, you're right. You're perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so we do have 3 minutes in case people have questions. There's a lot in there, and obviously we just before you joined us, we were having experiences of well, I had a very strong experience of sharing space with Asaf, and so I was very much thinking along the lines that you were saying. So thank you for that. But I don't know if there are questions in the room. Yeah, Asaf has a question. Asaf, you might have to come closer though, because the owl is powerful, but not that powerful. You do have a question, it's on its way.
Thank you. One just thought, just a concept I've been thinking with, one of heteropoiesis rather than copoiesis. I think, especially the case, I think, on hydrofeminism and other texts, so that kind of thing, there's this, something that goes, the other is constitutive of the self. But my question is actually about your predictions about the last, it was very quick, but if I understood, you predicted that depersonalization would, first, people with higher traits of depersonalization would be more comfortable with interacting with robots, or with like with artificial systems. I could imagine it also that way around, right? So if you are, would it be the case that the more you have a sense of your own embodiment, it's easier for you maybe to then confer it onto an artificial system, because we animate, and we saw it yesterday with the rabbit, right? We animate a lot of things. So would it be maybe that way around? You feel more uncomfortable, even less. You feel less, harder for you to make something else alive because you yourself less connected. And I'm just wondering, like, from the why that specific.
So thank you very much for that. I'm sorry I wasn't able to. As I said, as Mel said, I have a finger with many pies, so it's like difficult. It's just like to choose. It's like which one shall I choose? Yeah, which one of flavors? But I actually do have data on this, and we show that basically we were right. So people that feel more detached from the body and the self, they are more comfortable with interacting with humanoid robots versus humans. So yeah, we're writing the preprint at the moment, so hopefully we'll get it there as soon as possible. So that's so that's one finding, which I think it makes sense in the sense like if people that feel detached from the body got self-detachment through, let's say, highly stressful interactions with other humans because they were perceived like, threatening, whatever, then maybe interacting with systems that they are perceived less threatening, in the sense like more like objects, then that might explain why they feel more comfortable interacting with artificial agents rather than humans. So that's one thing. But also we did a VR study where again, we design a virtual environment where people can embody either a robot or a human. So in VR, you can do a task, the joint assignment task, or other way as having a robotic body versus like a human body. And you do the task again with either a co-agent, which is either a robot or a human. And again, we found that people that feel detached from the body, they are more comfortable, so they embody easier robotic bodies than the human bodies. And we're still trying to, as I said, it makes sense through this lens, but yeah, I think it's been like 2 months that we are trying like to come up with a very good explanation why this may be the case. But it's kind of like a robust funding because we tested this in almost like 100 participants. So it's yeah, so it's definitely going there. So there is something about the human embodiment that actually, and I think this is concerning because these people are not happy. So if you want people to be more comfortable with artificial agents, but the price to pay is to actually be more disconnected from your body, then maybe we should be careful what type of like artificial agents we are interacting with when we are building.